Welcome to our first episode of Random Acts of Horror, the podcast where we review movies, TV shows, and whatever else we find in the horror genre completely at random. My name is Tom Rockwell. You may know me better online as Devo Spice, the comedy rapper who has had multiple hits on the Dr. Demento Show, runs The Fump, or the Funny Music Project, and does several other podcasts, including Manic Mondays, The Fumpcast with Luke Ski, and The Insider. Joining me this week on our very first episode, coming to you all the way from Durham, North Carolina, you know her as the astounding award-winning author of Six Wakes, Station Eternity, and my personal favorite, The Shambling Guide to New York City. You know her as the Hugo-nominated editor of Escape Pod, the weekly science fiction podcast, and you know her as the Hugo-winning podcaster of Ditch Diggers and the host of the longest-running writing advice podcast in existence, I Should Be Writing. Please welcome Mur Lafferty.
Wow, that sounds so much better when you say it than when I try to talk about what I've been up to, but this is great.
So
I need
welcome.
to have you introduce me everywhere I go.
Okay.
When I go to the doctor, it's going to be you coming in first, saying all of that. That's going to be great.
I can do that. I will totally follow you around doing that.
Awesome.
Also joining me this week, coming to you all the way from Los Angeles, California, you know him as the creator and host of the popular theme park review channel Some Jerk with a Camera. You know him as the writer and singer of such comedy songs as Sirius Black, The Guy on TV's Not Happy, and Teeth Clenched. And you know him as the guy I completely ripped off to create this very podcast, the creator and host of Escape from Walt Disney, Tony Goldmark. Welcome, Tony.
I wholeheartedly endorse this event or product.
As you can tell, I have not only ripped off your format, I've ripped off your introduction format.
I noticed, yes.
The rule is everybody gets one. So the next time you come on the
Right.
podcast, it's just going to be, and welcome Tony Goldmark, you know.
My rule is, well, hey, if I ever poach any of your guests, I can poach your intros as well. Sometimes,
Absolutely, yes.
I'm not going to name names, but sometimes it's hard getting it up to 3. Sometimes to 3 things you might know someone for.
Yeah.
But
So,
Anyway.
Tony, besides being the creator of Escape from Walt Disney, you are not much of a horror guy.
I am not a horror guy at all.
Okay.
Or barely a horror guy. I'm not, okay, I've seen a few horror movies here and there. I am not by any means a horror guy. I was never into them as a kid. I was a pussy when I was a kid. They always scared me. And I've never really been into them as an adult either. I respect it as a genre completely. I have no gripes with anyone who is into it, obviously, by me being friends with you, but it's just not my thing. Although, the closest I ever came to getting into horror was when I was married and my ex-wife made me watch all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies and most of the Chucky movies.
Oh, okay.
So that's about all I know about horror.
Okay, so you do have some experience there, but this
A teensy bit, yeah.
I wanted to have you on the podcast for obvious reasons, but it kind of inspired an idea, and I was thinking that since this is a horror podcast, I thought it would be fun to have non-horror fans on the show once in a while, not every episode, but once in a while, and have them be our human sacrifices by subjecting them to all the horrors that we know and love. So, Tony, thank you for letting me do the show, and congratulations on being our first human sacrifice.
Wouldn't be the first time, and I mean, I'm just curious how you knew I was a virgin, but anyway, I guess it was that obvious, yeah.
So, I just want to just be on the first episode only. I just want to mention a couple of things because people might be asking, why Netflix? Why not Shudder? And the reason is just kind of incidental. I was laid off last January from my job, and we had to cut all the expenses. And I canceled Shudder. Well, when my prepaid year ran out, I didn't renew it. And we canceled a bunch of other stuff. We kept Netflix because other people in the house watch it. So that's why we're going with Netflix for the moment. I do now have a job again. I just recently started my new job. Haven't gotten a paycheck yet. Need one of those before I can start spending money again. So for the time being, we are using Netflix, and we're going to mix it up, I think. We're going to stick with Netflix for 3 or 4 months, and then we're going to move on to Paramount Plus or whatever else is out there.
Also, I don't have Shudder, so it's probably best that we're using Netflix for this one.
That was the other reason. It's something that I kind of assume most people have. So the master list that you fed into the randomizer and picked from, I had to create manually. There is a website out there called whatsonnetflix.com, and it had a mostly complete list, but then I had to go back and add some stuff that I found that they didn't have.
That was the process for creating my master list as well for my podcast. Is when Disney Plus launched, I had to just compile it all myself, and it wasn't completely accurate from any list I saw online. So, and I've been updating it ever since. Yeah.
So I had to update it, and I updated it this afternoon. I found out that whatsonnetflix.com has a by day what's been added to Netflix. So I just went through the last 2 weeks and added a couple of horror films that I didn't know were on there. Unfortunately, Netflix shut down their API about a decade ago, because that would have made things nice and easy for me, but no. And the other issue is what defines horror. Because you can start getting into this nebulous area of, are thrillers considered horror? Are, supernatural dramas considered horror? And the way I did it was anything that Netflix labeled as horror went on the list. Just because I don't have time to watch everything and be, I can kind of see that might be a horror. No. So we ended up with a master list of 312 items, which I think is a good starting point. I can't promise that everything that people would consider horror is on the list, and I can't promise that everything on the list are things that people would consider horror. We're going to get what we get. So this week, the axe landed on a film called The Binding. Have any of you seen this?
Nope, never seen it, never heard of it.
Okay.
Nope, never seen it.
After reading the review, I may have actually seen this. So we'll see if this sounds familiar to me. I believe this is an Italian horror movie, so it might actually be in Italian. And I'm watching the trailer right now that's up on Netflix, and it does look familiar, so I think I may have watched this during lockdown. Obviously, it didn't make a huge impression on me if I did watch it, because I'm not, it's not jumping out as, oh my God, that was awesome, or anything like that. But
I know just enough about Italian horror to know that Italian horror is a subgenre unto itself that has a great many admirers and goes all the way back in film history, at least to the 60s. But But that's pretty much all I know. I couldn't even name any titles of Italian horror. Well, the director of this movie is named Domenico Emanuele de Feudis, or Feudis. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. And this is written by him and two other Italian people, and it stars a bunch of Italian people with extremely Italian names. Here's how Italian the people in this movie are. One of them is literally named Maestro. Nice. Mia Maestro, to be exact, and Mia Maestro and Riccardo Riccardo Scamarcio. That's his name, sure. Or is it Riccardo or Ricciardo? I don't know how it is with two C's.
Probably Riccardo. Oh, two C's?
Probably. Two C's, yeah. Ricciardo.
Yeah.
That might be... I don't know.
All right, so this is...
I mean, we're stupid Americans, so we can only attempt Italian so long before we just start sounding like Mario.
But we'll be right back after we watch The Binding.
Ah, look at all the tasty people.
This is The Fump.
Hannibal Lecter, he's eating liver, Chianti, some nice fava beans. This is his dream.
Me hate your cookies, stop freaking asking me. Me reject all your cookies, though you ask me constantly. Screw all your cookies, evil corporate entity. Oh, you and your cookies can all suck it. Hey, you know what?
It's got California class and rotten dairy style as we're cruising every prime timeline, light mile. But forget about the bridge and come on down, my friends, cause the lower decks is where the real action begins. And time again, the junior staff has always proven that they keep the ship afloat.
Funny Music Project at thefump.com. THEFUMP.com.
Okay, we just watched The Binding, which was a 2020 Italian Netflix movie directed by Domenico de Feudis. And I think this is going to be an interesting conversation because the reviews for this movie are all over the place. Like if you look up the ratings online, there's an equal number of people who loved it and hated it. There's a smaller but equal number of people who really liked it and really didn't like it. And then there's a large number of people in the middle who were like, meh. So it's all over the place. It has terrible ratings on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's like 17%, 19%.
Oh, but I am not surprised. It's weird. You say a lot of people thought it was meh, and a lot of people just hated it. I hated it because it was meh. So I'm kind of in both categories because, I mean, in part, I wish we had a more interesting movie to cover for the first episode of this new podcast, Devo, but you remember how I said I was absolutely not a horror guy? Mm-hmm. Like, there are very few horror movies I've seen, and yet I felt like I had seen everything in this movie before. It felt like this was so standard issue. This was just such a bog standard baby's first horror film. You know, everything in it was a trope. There was nothing original in this.
I'll give
whatsoever.
you that. This was a lot of, you know, stuff that we've seen before in a lot of other horror movies, but it worked for me. And I have seen this before. I don't remember when or why I watched it, but I did recognize it once it started, especially when they pulled up to the, you know, the big house and there's the whole Italian family there. I'm like, yep, okay, yes, I remember this now.
You know what it is? This is such a basic horror trope that they're dealing with here of bringing a lover to home to meet your parents or meet your family, and then supernatural or just horrific shit happens and it's a horror movie. That is such a basic trope that it's been parodied a lot, and I've seen a lot of movies that subvert that trope. The two big ones that spring to mind are Get Out and Ready or Not. Like both movies I have seen. So it's like I've seen I've seen the subversions of this, and this is just that without the subversion.
What got me is that so it starts with the matriarch and her housemaid, companion person,
her nurse, whatever,
like
her lesbian lover. Who cares?
Yeah, holding a woman down and cutting her back and holding a mirror up to her, and it really looks like they grabbed a young woman and they're torturing her, and so you get the whole, okay, so there's sinister people in his family, and then you realize, no, they're kind of on your side, but they're really bad at it. So it's like, you know, okay, so they do manage to do these spells and healing stuff, but they do a terrible job of it. And I'm sorry, I will buy all sorts of weird, freaky shit, but if you have a tarantula biting my child, I am not going to go back to bed in that same room. And I am not going to say, oh, it's fine, she'll be okay tomorrow. And then when there are massive blisters bubbling up on her back, I'm not going to say, sure, let's go back to the house. The doctor said it's fine. We're good. No,
yeah, that doctor really did blow them off, didn't he? He was like, it's fine. Her fever's going down. Yeah, it might be an allergy. She's fine.
It reminded me of that Seinfeld episode where there was like this conspiracy among the medical community that Elaine was a difficult patient, so she went to every doctor and they just said, oh, this looks fine, you'll be fine. And it turned into this whole parody of a conspiracy thriller. It was... Yeah.
When they were holding the little girl down and piercing the fat bubble on her back and having it ooze black blood, I'm thinking, didn't the doctor say they could call him at any time? He did.
Well,
he did say that.
they're in the middle of a pagan ritual. You don't want to bother the doctor for that. You know.
The doctor looked like he'd be fine with it.
Was it even a pagan ritual? They didn't specify what kind of ritual this was or what the lore even was.
It was a Southern Italian ritual. This is apparently based on actual practice. Binding or linking is a way of having a psychic control over another person by inhabiting their agency over their body and their decision-making skills. This was a practice that was once common in southern Italy, where the story is based. So it's, it's southern Italian voodoo, basically.
Well, you see, it's a very important distinction, because what makes binding different than simply possessing someone is that here it's called binding.
Right. Yes, because exactly.
It's just possessing someone. It's just the same thing, only they changed the name. I don't. And this could have been.
The girl wasn't possessed. She was more just controlled by Ada, the ex-fiancé.
Okay. You say this was a real thing that people did? I kind of call bullshit, because that's just not how free will works. You don't just someone's...
Well, I don't think historically they actually succeeded.
Yeah.
No, but they
probably
tried,
worked as well as voodoo does, where it sort of works if you believe it does, type thing.
Or witchcraft or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it worked as well as they thought it did. Fine.
So the premise of this movie is that this guy Francesco brings his fiancée and her daughter Sophia to his old Italian mother's villa in Italy to meet her and announce that they are engaged. And apparently they have to sleep in separate rooms still because they're not married yet, and it's a traditional
Except when they
Italian
have
thing.
sex.
Except when they have sex. Well, they weren't sleeping, to be fair.
Yeah,
True.
right.
True.
And it was that movie sex where the woman's wearing a negligee the whole time.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And it starts pretty much right away with us not trusting the grandmother because of all the weird rituals and stuff that she has going on. But it turns out, nope, wasn't the grandma. It was Francesco's old fiancée Ada who came out of nowhere. And we don't really know what Ada is. Did she die? Has she been living in that cave for 30 years or
She
there's a lot that's not explained
zombie.
in this film.
But here's the thing: when we first get a good look, or not that good a look, because I'll talk about the cinematography in this thing. But when we first get a pretty decent look of how Ada looks now, and she looks really desiccated. She looks like basically a zombie. But here's the thing: she's got such a blank expression and long black hair. And her facial structure is such that I couldn't stop laughing because I thought she looked like Tommy Wiseau. I really did. I was getting huge Tommy Wiseau vibes from how Ada currently looks. I did not bind her. I did not. It's bullshit. Oh, hi, Blood Mark.
See, my first thought was that Ada looked too much like Emma. They cast...
Yeah.
An actress who looked too much like the girl's mother.
Yeah.
And
you mentioned how we thought the old lady was going to be the bad guy at first, and they almost go in kind of an interesting direction at the very end. Spoilers, if you don't mind me jumping there. But at the very end, in the last 5-10 minutes, Emma stabs herself because she's temporarily bound too. Mm-hmm. And so and we get the sense that Francesca's dead because his glasses go sliding into the room. So I guess that means he's dead too, whatever. But
no, I don't think that was that him, or was that that was him? I thought that was the other woman, the nurse or whatever.
Those were his glasses.
Those were his glasses. But didn't he wake up in the cave?
He strangled Ada and everything looked fine, and then she just kind of did a jump scare out of the shadows and grabbed him again.
Yeah.
And the next thing
but he was still in the cave.
Sure.
I don't know. Maybe she
I mean-
grabbed her glasses.
Oh, yeah, okay,
maybe
so
she grabbed his
she just
glasses
took his
and
glasses.
slid
Okay.
him into the room.
Yeah, okay.
and she slid him into the room just to be ominous, I guess. But anyway,
Yeah.
it almost looked like, okay, that's a little interesting on paper that this woman who we at first were led to believe was the villain now might have to be the hero because everyone else is dead. But no, then it turns out Emma wasn't really dead after all, and she ends up stabbing the big bad, and end of the movie. And
Hey, those old lady Italian scissors are not to be trifled with. My grandmother had a pair of those, and
I'm sure that's true.
Brutal.
Did you notice them hanging on the wall? Many pairs of scissors hanging on the wall that Emma and Sophia were sleeping in.
Yeah, there were lots of scissors in this movie. I mean, I
Okay,
tell
so
you,
let me
I'm
ask
like,
you.
my grandmother
you
was
guys
pure
something.
Italian.
Sorry,
She
go
had
on.
a dozen of these things.
And you got to make sure they're nice and pristine so Weird Al can run with them. But
Right.
anyway,
No, I was gonna say. So you guys see a tarantula bite a little girl. You
Every
just
day.
got out of bed, so I'm assuming you're barefoot.
sure.
What do you do? Is your
Well-
first thought step on the big hairy spider with your bare foot?
Yeah, that was not smart of him. Maybe he was wearing slippers. I don't know, but I definitely would probably try to find a different place to stay at that point because I don't know how it is with tarantulas, but I know with a lot of bugs, if you see one, it means there's a million. But I don't know if that's the case with tarantulas or not. I'm not
I
a
think
tarantula
spiders are a
expert.
little more solitary, but
Okay,
still,
okay.
you just don't. Apparently, there was one on one of the trees, but I didn't see it. My husband was watching part of the movie with me, and he said he saw the tarantula in the trees. So,
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. There was a tarantula in the trees at one point.
Yeah, when Sophia was climbing the tree trying to get to that like wind chime that was stuck up there,
yeah.
there was a tarantula.
What was up with those uprooted trees? That
I don't know.
That was clearly meant to be an ominous visual portending something, but it went nowhere. They did. Maybe it was just a red herring or something. I don't know.
Maybe, and they also never really explained what was wrong with the trees. Remember, she stabs the trees and this black goo came out of it. Although that's the same black goo that came out of Sophia at the end, because when their blood mixed, Sophia's was black and Emma's was red.
And what about the sink with the water that suddenly turns black?
That's just an old Italian thing that just happens in the whole country.
And by the way, is it me or when the water turned black, did the sink give a belch sound?
Yep. Also,
it sounded like that's
issue.
also an old Italian thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this goes into, again, the fact that, sure, there are these old women doing spells as far as they know, but they're not good at it. So, no,
Right.
I mean, possibly those are all the trees they killed.
Maybe, yeah.
I also couldn't help but notice that this 90-minute movie had maybe 20 minutes worth of plot in it.
Yeah.
Like, you could have very easily condensed this down to just a half-hour TV episode, and so there's just long stretches of nothing happening. I know that they're probably trying to play it off like, oh, it's atmospheric, but when there's nothing interesting happening, there's such a fine line between atmospheric and dull. And, like, at a certain point about halfway through, it's, Devo, I gotta tell you, another benefit to using Netflix to watch these movies is about halfway through, I started watching it at 1.25 speed. And I honestly don't think I missed anything.
No, so. I wouldn't think you would. I guess I felt like it was almost like a student film because they wanted to be ominous and they wanted to have atmosphere, and they just failed. Like, we want the dog to be barking at something. It's like, okay, but the dog actually has to be barking at something, even if the dog thinks it's something, or we think we see a shadow of something. But just the dog barking, that goes from ominous to annoying real fast.
Well, at one point, the dog was barking at the trees off in the distance, and that's when we first get our glimpse of Ada, that something is going on. But yeah,
the dog running off for no reason, and Yeah.
I mean, this was definitely an intentionally slow film, and they did a lot of like setting the stage with the mother and the rituals, and getting Sophia involved in the grandmother's magic, and they did a lot of setting the stage, which I actually liked. I mean, I admit the first like 20 minutes of the film are very slow, but I actually did like the setup, so that when Sophia does finally get taken by Ada, it's much more impactful that Emma kind of has to go back to the future mother-in-law with her tail between her legs and like, help me.
Well, there was so much just kind of random ominous imagery in this movie that ended up not meaning anything.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned the dogs, you mentioned the dog barking, we mentioned the uprooted trees. There was also that one scene where the little girl goes out on the balcony and just sees a bird pecking at a dead bird.
Oh yeah, she's delighted. Mom, come on.
And I honestly thought, okay, is that foreshadowing cannibalism? Is cannibalism going to be what's really going on here? No, doesn't seem to mean anything.
And what was with the baby? Right after that, they see like the mom and a young woman and a baby crying, and they're like exchanging something. Is it drugs? Is it spells? We don't know.
They just put so much stuff in this movie that didn't amount to anything. I guess because horror movies just have ominous visuals, and that's what they thought they needed to do. I mean, and also I gotta say, mileage may vary on this, but I really didn't care for the cinematography in this film, and particularly the color grading. It's that really bad digital photography that all movies have looked like for the last decade, where it's just everything's washed out and everything just looks way too brown. I mean, it's the south of Italy, for God's sake, and the color grading is just doing no favors to what should be the natural beauty of all this.
Yeah, there was some amazing landscape, happening there, and you're right. They just kind of washed it out.
Yeah, huge shame. Also, at the very beginning, the first note I took was, it's the 2020s, so of course there's like 7 production company logos, one of which was simply called Lebowski. When I don't know if that had any connection whatsoever to the Big Lebowski, but this movie could not have had less to do with that, so it very disappointing.
Yeah.
Although, I guess, I don't know, maybe you could argue that Donnie was binded to Walter or something. I don't know.
All right. I think we've beaten this horse enough. So it is time to ask that age-old question. What is the tie-in? We get a reboot, we get merchandise, we get a porn parody. What do we got? What's going on here, Tony?
Well, I got some merchandise for you. I think the tie-in merchandise is obvious. The Binding brand binder paper. It binds all the paper together in one binder, and the paper will give you a paper cut that allows you to use your blood to spill out and connect you with Zombie Wiseau, I suppose.
Sounds great. Mur?
Porn parody, definitely, because we'll need to have the mother actually respond to the sex in the house, and that will drive the plot a hell of a lot better than this one did.
All right. Do you have a name for the porn parody, or just the binding?
Oh, I'm not
parody?
good with puns.
Okay.
Oh, the bind dong.
There you go. Oh, you could go like extreme binding. There's all sorts of ways you can do it.
Oh yeah. Also, at the very end, Netflix recommended The Terminal, of all things, the Tom Hanks movie where he's stuck in the airport. Maybe it thought it was a horror movie. I don't know.
We just went straight to the birds. So
Oh, okay.
that's what we got.
Yeah, I didn't know that was on Netflix until today when I was updating the thing.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, you're all wrong. The actual merchandise tie-in is going to be little sticks that you buy at the store, and they're going to cost like $35, even though it's just a stick.
Of course.
And you have to have the little girl rip out a chunk of her hair, tie it around it, and sleep with it. And that's going to be like it's going to be like the next pet rock. It's going to be amazing.
Does the hair come with it, or do you have to have your own little girl sacrifice her hair?
Rip out your own hair and tie it around the thing. Yeah.
All right.
I do that all the time.
I'll buy one.
So, I think I know how this is going to go, but is this, now again, sticking with the throwing the axe motif, is this a hit or a miss, Mur?
Miss. It's too sleepy, except for the jump scares, and then they wake you up.
Tony?
This is a huge miss. I dozed off a few times during it. And that's why I had to start watching it at 1.25 speed, because I'd lost time. But it exists, and I guess if you're super into this kind of horror, maybe it'll be a nice time waster. But this is content. This just exists to exist. There's nothing special here.
Actually, if I could add in one more thing, I want to say it's just the classic. I didn't care about anybody.
Yeah.
I didn't care.
I
didn't dislike anybody, really. But it's like, I guess as a mom, the person I should have most identified with was the mom. And I'm like, yes, get your kid out of there. But you should have done it about an hour ago. And I still was just like, she's okay. But I just did not care enough about any of them to really get invested.
Well, I'm going to go against the grain on this one and call this one a hit. It worked for me. I mean, it's not the greatest film I've ever seen, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was, interesting enough that it kept me watching, and creepy enough that it kept me engaged. So, all right, who's got stuff to plug? Mur?
I have a new novella out. It is called The Ophelia Network. It is Blue's Clues meets 1984, and you can get it on Audible or where books are sold or where ebooks are sold.
Yeah, I need to get that on in print. I've listened to the audiobook multiple times, but I need a print copy because you can't sign an audiobook. Tony?
And I have a podcast called Escape from Walt Disney, where
the hell you say?
I know that this episode this podcast drew some inspiration from, shall we say, where in every episode we cover we watch and review either a movie or a TV episode or a special or a series of shorts available on Disney Plus. And I mean, if you're just subscribed to Disney Plus, not the Hulu crap they've added to it now. But we cover all sorts of things on Disney Plus. I'm not sure exactly when this episode is going to come out, but I know that as of this recording, the most recent episode was on a Nat Geo documentary called The Rescue. I'm currently, as we edit this, hard at work, or as we record this, I'm hard at work editing an Escape from Walt Disney episode about a 30 for 30 ESPN documentary called Dion's Double Play about Deion Sanders. And after that, we got a couple episodes coming up, a couple other episodes coming up. So, I don't know if those will be out yet by the time this comes out. So just check it out. Escape from Walt Disney, wherever podcasts are available. And also check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Tony Goldmark, for all 3 seasons of my old web series, Some Jerk with a Camera, and follow me on Twitter @Tony Goldmark.
All right, and you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and now Blue Sky @DevoSpice. And I don't have anything in particular coming up in the immediate future, but I was cast in 2 short films recently that are now making the rounds on the film festival circuit, and I got to see them both this last weekend. They came out great. One is called Consequences, where I play a former cop who was kidnapped by a guy wanting revenge. And the other is a horror movie called I Know It's Ben Crane, where I play a guy who was wrongly convicted of murder after I walked in on my wife getting attacked by an incubus. So if either of those show up near you in any way, shape, or form, check them out.
Don't you hate when that happens?
Please help out the show by subscribing, giving us 5 stars, or leaving a review. If you'd like to help us out even more, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/randomactsofhorror, and you will get new episodes 3 days early and ad-free. Special thanks to all our patrons, past, present, and future, living and undead. And I am now joined by one of our guests on the next episode, Julia Larson. How you doing, Julia?
Doing great. Excited to be here.
Are you ready to throw the axe?
I'm so ready.
All right, try not to kill any of the neighbors' cats. I know you've taken in a few of them recently.
Right?
So throw the axe and tell me what you hit.
We got the chalk line.
The chalk line. Let's see. That is... Oh, the chalk line. 2 words. Okay. Let's see. Probably should have logged into Netflix before I pulled this up. 2022 TV 14, hour and 47 minutes. In this suspenseful thriller, a couple finds a traumatized unknown child and must decipher the girl's strange behaviors to unlock her identity and past. All right. So join us next time as we watch The Chalk Line here on Random Acts of Horror.